Hello everybody, this is Maniac4Bricks, and I'm here today with another Collect-A-Thon video. Today we'll be looking at the 2009 wave of Bionicle figures from the early part of the year. These were the Glatorians. I'll talk about the story in just a bit, but first a little bit of info. These were 6 figures, which at the same time they had 6 smaller figures in different packs, but I'm not going to worry about those for this video. They kind of looked like them, but they weren't enough to... I don't have all of them here. I'm not going to worry about that for the collecting aspect. I actually, back in 2009, only had Skrull. That was the only one I was interested in at the time, but my opinion's changed over time, so now I have all of them to talk about for today. Each of these figures had roughly 50 to 60 pieces each, and were at a price point of $13 back in 2009. Now, as far as what these figures are, there's a little bit of story to talk about. I'm not going to talk about each one story and why they exist and whatever. I'm just going to talk about the general aspect. So, after 2008, we pretty much got the idea, okay, all of the things that happened up to 2008, and including 2008, happened on one planet, in a sort of 3-planet solar system of sorts. These take place on another nearby planet called Barra Magna, and by the name Barra, you should get the idea of barren. It is a desert planet, so there's a lot of survival aspect to it, there's a lot of hostility on this planet, and interestingly enough, the figures that exist on this planet, compared to the original one, Aqua Magna, each of these figures are actually supposed to be more organic than robotic. They do have a lot of robotic aspects, don't get me wrong, but they actually do have a little bit more to them than the original figures we've seen from 2001 to 2008. Now, with each of these figures in particular, these are called Glatorians because they battle as, well, gladiators, hence the name Glatorians. So, they pit into different they're in different regions, and each of those regions have fights between each other that are basically in a gladiator type style. They place bets, they win in competitions and things like that. They're not out to kill each other per se. They're just out to make the best for each of their tribes. Now, the only real outlier here, what I would say, is the Skrull, because that one's actually part of a specific race that is trying to take over a lot of the other tribes. So, this is just one example of one of those creatures from that tribe, and I can't remember the name of this one off the top of my head, but you can find more in the link in the description. Actually, just text in the description below, not even a link. But that particular figure, the tannish one, is actually part of, like, a very, very native tribe. They've kind of reverted back to being native instead of being more civilized like the rest of the other tribes. And I actually find it interesting, now that I look at it, that there is an ice tribe in a planet filled with desert. Don't ask me how that works. You can even argue jungle, but whatever. They still have nice color schemes with each of these figures. And as far as the builds go, I'd have to say this is actually pretty interesting. Now, they do have a lot of aspects compared to other figures. I'd say these 4 in particular have builds for the torso and for the legs that are very similar to a lot of other figures. Even the other 2, arms and legs wise, are very similar, and a lot of them have your standard amount of ball joints. It's like 3 in the arms, 3 in the legs, and 1 in the head. And occasionally some of them will have another quote-unquote ball joint of articulation with their blasters. We'll get into that in just a bit. I do want to mention that for Strakk, which is over in the corner here, I actually don't have all the right parts for him. One, these arms underneath these large icicle pieces are actually supposed to be light blue, the same way that they are for the legs. And 2, for some reason this one is broken. I don't know why. I don't think that's a particular, there's a factory error kind of thing, the way that lime green was around this time, so I think it's just, some other form of wear and tear. But I do want to talk about these 2 in particular, Strakk and the Skrull, because they have probably the most unique of the construction compared to any of the other figures. Now, I forget his name. Again, it's in the description. But he does have a little bit of variance in the, in the torso area, the way he's built, but it is pretty much standard. And for these two, it actually changes it up quite a bit. They have these L-shaped pin-type pieces that articulate their body in different ways. For Strakk here, you can see that his body actually leans outward like so. So it actually, has you tilt the lower half down, and then this half kind of comes up, and then you have a piece or two that covers it up there. So I actually think that's really cool to bring a new angle, literally, for this, style of figure. And other than that, pretty standard. I do like how he has a longer neck. I thought the head would actually be a little bit bigger. In fact, I thought for a lot of these figures, the heads would be bigger. These had a new type of head that were released at the time that actually make each of the masks and heads look smaller compared to previous figures. Enough on that for now. The Skrull is probably actually my favorite when it comes to design. Not only does he have a difference in how the torso is built, you can see how that looks here, where this entire section is kind of flipped sideways in order to give a more hunched look to him. But also, the way that the weapon is built here has a very nice style to it. I like the way this is used on the end to kind of curve around. It's got a lot of curve to this figure itself, and the color scheme is actually very nice. In fact, I'd say for a lot of these, the color scheme works out pretty well. I'd say the only exception is this one, because the black is a little bit too obvious here. I would have liked if there's a little bit more tan mixed in there. But I do have to give it some props for this tail edition that's on the back of it. Which, first of all, we have the older Mata foot that's in a tan color, which I don't think has been released before this figure. And also just have a lot of articulation for this stinger. Not a lot of Scorpion-type Bionicle sets have a elongated stinger that actually reaches pretty far forward from the head. And to this one, I gotta give it some credit. Other than that, it's a lot of standard stuff and a couple of open pins here. I don't know if that had to do with it just got the wrong parts or something like that, but it also has a little bit of a long neck, which is okay for the hunched look, but is still a little awkward when it comes to posing it elsewhere. For example, if you lean it all the way up, it just doesn't look that great to me. I do like Malum a little bit because of how his hands are designed. He has a lot of specialized pieces to him, especially around the arms. These claw pieces are special to him, as well as the head. The chest armor is a nice chest armor piece. I've always liked that one, and hasn't really appeared too many Bionicle sets. So I do like how it's expressive here, and even has a little bit of melding to it to mix around the colors. I do like where the Thornax launcher, that's what it's called, is placed with him. These shoulder armor pieces are cool, but large. I would say if you wanted to get this figure and you just wanted to change that up, change it with his feet. Because feet are roughly the same thing, but without these fin-like areas on the sides. And it actually gives a little bit more breadth to his feet, and a little bit easier on the shoulders. I get it, he's supposed to be a brute, but, just kind of not a lot to work with here, especially when you have a lot of large pieces next to each other. For this guy, not much to say. Like I said before, the chest armor looks pretty good, but other than that, not much. I do kind of like how the horns are on the sides. The swords are okay, but not really much to talk about. Gresh, I mean, if I remember the guy, the way he looks and the way his name is, he's pretty darn good. I do like this one because of a lot of these fin pieces that stick out. Gives him a lot more, a lot more size, a lot more color to him. I like the melding that's on here. I mentioned in a previous video, you can check out either in the cards or in the description below, that he has the same mask in Bionicle Stars. I'm not entirely sure if that's the same exact size for the mask, because it seems on Bricklink they have it as a different size here, but I don't quite remember if it's actually the same exact thing. So, it's close, but okay. I definitely like this one a lot better for the way that all this is shaped on here. The color scheme looks pretty good. He does have one or two parts that are actually broken at the end for this particular model that I'm looking at, but I do like the shield just by the pieces. It's not a very practical shield, but it still has a nice shape to it. And a lot of these armor pieces are actually on the back as well, so you could kind of consider that an odd thing where a lot of black is actually shown forward, like I mentioned in a previous figure. Now, while we're here at the back, I want to mention something that was part of a game with a lot of these figures, both with Glatorians and Glatorian Legends, which would come out later that same year. They have a counter on somewhere on their body, usually on the back or on a foot, that counts from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and skull. The idea is that with the canisters and another player, you would have the opportunity to, one at a time, try to shoot these Thornax spikes, which not on here, but are on some of the other figures you see here. You can shoot each of them at the player, or, well, not the player, but the figure. You shoot them at the figure or at the canister to get different points. Each of those points would deduct their life counter on the back, or, the back of their character, and once they reach 0 first, they lose. So, that kind of elimination type of game, kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where you have to try to knock down the person's life points until, before they knock down yours. Now, these are actually, in story, supposed to be like naturally grown fruit on Bear Magna that explode on contact, hence the spikes. These are actually very rubbery pieces. The middle part in black is probably the most solid out of it, which is good for when you place it on top of this piece, or assembly of pieces. But otherwise, it's actually a pretty easy mechanism to use. It does occasionally, prop up like that. Sometimes it's easier than others, but I kind of like it. And it's something that, since this series, they've actually used in a couple different lines between Bionicle and Hero Factory after this point. So, it had some legacy, if you may, or lasting value when it comes to that kind of play feature. So overall, these are pretty nice looking sets. Let me know in the comments below which of these you like. And if you want to see my video about Bionicle Stars, where I talk about Gresh and Skrull in their more miniature later forms, you can check that video out in the description or at the end of the video or on the cards. And we'll see you next time with more LEGO videos. Be sure to subscribe so you can get more information from LEGO, or about LEGO from me. And I think next week, oh yeah, we have Rahaga that we're talking about for next Collect-A-Thon. Those are from 2006, so we're jumping back a couple years, but it'll be interesting. So, we'll see you next time with more videos.